Welcome to the High Impact Medicine podcast. High Impact Medicine is a community of doctors and medical students who are thinking about ways to lead impactful and meaningful careers. Our podcast will feature interviews and discussions, which we hope will leave you both inspired and informed. My name is Tanya Kuzmich, and today I'm speaking to Dr. Dan Epstein. Dan is a medical doctor and an academic with a PhD from Monash University's Faculty of Public Health. He has previously worked as an academic consultant across public and private sectors, a medical educator, an amateur forecaster, and a high-performance athlete. He's currently the Director of Strategy and Game Design at the Long Game Project. The Long Game Project helps teams improve their organization's resilience. And we talk about how Dan came up with this idea by combining his expertise in decision-making, behavior change, forecasting, and pandemic prevention. I've put a link to the Long Game Project in the show notes, and I'd highly recommend you check out the scenario generator. In this conversation with Dan, we discuss organizational decision-making, research translation, and the importance of nurturing all of your different interests. I had a great time speaking with Dan, so I hope you enjoy. Dan, could you please introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dr. Dan Epstein. So I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. I'm a GP or a family doctor and also a PhD in public health. And I work still clinically a couple of days a week. And I also work on some kind of EA adjacent kind of research projects and bits and bobs in my spare time with my other 3 days a week after I've finished my PhD.
Mm-hmm. And the project that you're working on right now, what excites you about it?
Yeah, so the project I'm working on at the moment it's got a bit of a working title at the moment called the Long Game Project, which is trying to help organisations improve institutional decision making with a bit of a EA and long-termist kind of focus through tabletop kind of exercise design. So through simulating kind of tabletop situations like pandemics and et cetera, hoping to help kind of people navigate those kind of situations and play things before they have to live them. So helping people make decisions, in a simulated environment. And I'm excited to work on it because it's something that I really enjoy. A mold of the kind of hobbies that I like game design and board gaming, as well as kind of my expertise in kind of decision making and pandemic prevention. And really excited to hopefully have some impact with kind of decision makers as we go through the process.
And what's motivated you to work on this project?
That's a good question. I think when I was going through my medical training, I realized that as a clinician, you can kind of make decisions and help people one by one, but sometimes it feels a little bit like shoveling sand to the beach, and helping people make larger, bigger decisions is a better way to kind of scale up your own skills. And after doing a bit of research and getting interested in, I guess, kind of decision making through research, it was those kind of things that made me kind of excited to get involved with a project that would, I guess, help people make decisions for other people as well. So I think engaging with stakeholders that make bigger decisions is something that I've always been really interested in. And yeah, this is a way for me to kind of engage with those people and help them kind of sharpen their axe in terms of their toolkits that they have in approaching kind of decisions and large decisions and fast-paced dynamic environments which have a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. And where did you develop these decision-making skills?
I'm not sure if I have the decision-making skills. I'm not sure, we all have kind of our biases. I think I'm interested in people in how they make decisions. So my PhD focused a lot on, and this was before the pandemic that I started, of all things, kind of vaccine hesitancy. So I've always been interested in kind of how people make choices, and specifically with vaccines, it's a really interesting kind of situation because you have this tool that works really, really well, like a vaccine, but it has like almost like a communications problem where people and their decision making around vaccines is quite sometimes at times not rational or not in their best interest or in other people's best interest. And it's quite interesting to me just how humans work with their funny brains and the funny biases. And I think that just getting interested through the human decision-making process through my research is where I really kind of started to to kind of learn about how people go about making a decision. And then, as part of that research, learning a little bit more about how organizations make decisions was really interesting to me. So if you think about the individual making a decision, a lot of the time you've got these kind of pros and cons and your own biases in your own head. But when it comes to an organization making a decision, it's usually a group of people that have to get together and either make a consensus or vote on something or do something based on a bunch of rules or predetermined kind of ways of behaving, be that a board or a startup company or a group of people in a government. And they're not making decisions just as one person. They're making decisions as a group and for a group. So they're representing usually something else. So you get this conglomeration of different opinions, and it's a real kind of messy, dynamic thing that kind of wobbles in a direction. It doesn't really have like a very clear way of people formulating a path to getting a decision made. It's usually just a kind of iterative process that happens and eventually forms like a vote or a consensus or a board motion or something. So I got quite interested by this human invention, the organization, and how it makes decisions. It's usually just like a bunch of humans kind of, and maybe soon computers that kind of wobble together in a kind of decision-making process. I think it's really interesting because those organizations are mostly the vehicles that determine a lot of the rules in which we live by and how we use a lot of money and resources. And I think those organizational decision-making structures are quite vulnerable, or we haven't had a lot of time to train them, and a lot of the people in those organizations are just an individual in a team, and they're not sure how to navigate that decision-making process as an organization unless you have a lot of experience. So yeah, it's a fascinating area to me to see how the kind of organization behaves in comparison to the individual.
Mm-hmm. This rings a bell for me. I once listened to a really interesting podcast about how organizations are now agents and they act based on sort of different rules. And I forgot where I found this podcast. So in your reading around this, do you have any kind of recommendations for key books or people who have kind of given you information into this field?
That's a good question. I think, I think reading things just through different lenses is probably a good way to think about it. So, if you read a lot of the core kind of decision-making books, just through a different lens, I think if you're reading it and thinking about it from an individual's perspective, most people read books on decision-making and they think about, it's how can I improve my decision-making in my own life? How can I get fitter? How can I get healthier or get better sleep or whatever? But if you start thinking about it from a perspective of a group that you might be involved in, like how could my group, make better decisions with this or that? I think that's like a different kind of mindset to kind of switch when you're reading any kind of material around decision making. So I don't want to be too prescriptive in like what to read. I just think when you're reading something, it's good to have a different lens you can flip on.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of key insight have you recently gotten from your work?
What kind of key insights? Through diving into the long game project and kind of thinking about how I structure and design scenarios to kind of test the rigor of organizational decision making, and really specifically designing to see, what type of scenarios would stress test certain parts of the decision making process for organizations. I started to come up with these kind of models about how we think about things in a future scenario. And I think a lot of people spend a lot of their time thinking about good futures. So I think like if you're thinking about yourself and where you are in 5 years' time, a lot of the time that'll be, I'm going to be in this job that'll be, this much further down the line, or I'm going to be in this bigger house, or I'm going to donate this much more money. And with organizations, I think they do the same with, cost projecting and revenue projecting, and every graph goes up and to the right when people think about the future. So, a lot of the organizational thinking time spent in the future, where people are kind of running these kind of future scenarios, is always in a good future. It's not often in a bad future or in a situation where something goes wrong. Or if they are spending time thinking about those things, it's with predictable things that have gone wrong. So it's like an obvious thing on the horizon that might be coming up, or a challenge that's, really closely in front of them where they have to make a decision. I think people need to spend a bit more time thinking about those possible futures where something goes really wrong. I think that's not an often. I mean, we do spend time in our heads in the past and in the future, but I think a lot of people, when they're spending time in the in the future in their head, it's not often in a really bad future, especially with organizational thinking.
And what do you think are the requisite conditions for an individual or an organization to be able to think with this kind of mindset about the future?
That's a really good question. I think it just takes, I think you need to develop those skills about, probabilistic thinking is really important, and being able to imagine a range of different outcomes and try to not have biases towards the desirable outcomes that you might wish to happen. And I think if you can kind of, have that backwards thinking where you can start at a bad outcome and kind of step backwards to figure out what might have led there, or what kind of barriers might be in the way, or what key decisions or key moments might lead to a good or a bad outcome. It's never, it can also cause like a lot of stress and tension if you're spending your whole time thinking about bad outcomes. It's like a lot of the time, putting my kind of healthcare hat on, that's a lot of the time what kind of disordered thinking kind of leads to in mental health conditions as well. Like if you get a lot of rumination on kind of negative outcomes, that's a lot of the time what anxiety or depression can present as. So you have to be careful when you're really spending too much time in a future negative space. I think you need to do it productively and know that you can separate it out from reality. So I think it's important for people or organizations to be able to spend time in those kind of future situations and what decisions might lead to them, but to do it in a healthy way that's productive in terms of preparing for something, or in terms of thinking about how to mitigate potentially bad outcomes.
Mm-hmm. This makes me think of something I've recently discussed with some friends. EA as a community does tend to be quite unique in thinking quite negatively about the future in some ways, thinking about the risks. There are definitely healthy ways to do it, and it can be quite productive. But I also sometimes wonder if the people who are attracted to EA could be because they are in this more negative state of mind, and in a community, their state of mind is then normative. So they might be a little bit depressed about the future, a little bit less engaged in their life, and kind of this sort of thinking is encouraged and normal. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a tricky question to unpack, and I think that maybe people who are EA adjacent will think about impact first of all, and then that's where it starts, and then the next step from that is, well, how do I have impact? And impact really means kind of preventing a bad thing from happening in the EA context, or it means improving something that is currently bad. And so preventing, just like primary healthcare, is usually the most kind of cost-effective way to do something, rather than cleaning up afterwards or making something better. So I think the general values-based kind of cost-effectiveness mindset leads people to kind of discover things that are potentially future bad. So I think the way in which we structure our thinking in EA around cost-effectiveness and about trying to do good naturally leads us to try and find things in the future to prevent. So it kind of makes you spend a lot of your creative thinking time and forecasting time trying to imagine things that are not good and how to prevent them. Perhaps, we should spend a little bit more time once we have discovered something or landed on something in our brain that we think is a future bad thing, about spending 20% of our time getting there and then 80% of our time thinking backwards about, growth mindset, kind of how we could prevent for that, or how we could get ready for that. I don't think it necessarily leads to like a general sense of like doom and foreboding. Like I think that if anything, it's like rational thinking in comparison to having just like a complete optimistic, warm glow mindset. I think that it's quite rational to think about potentially negative, disastrous outcomes. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think you put it quite well, actually. I mean, for sure, a negative thinking style can make you think negative thoughts, and then that can spiral in some way. But a negative thinking style can also make you see things clearer. And yeah, you're probably very right that as individuals and organizations, we are spending a lot of time in a very optimistic growth projection kind of thinking frame, and a bit more time spent productively in a pessimistic state of mind could help us prevent future disasters, which have the best expected value of good. I'm probably guilty myself of learning some things the hard way from being overly optimistic. What is a difficult lesson that you've learned?
I think a difficult lesson that I have learned is things take time. A lot of people who, for example, go through medical school really like to, plan things really, really quickly, like they're going to happen very fast and at the fastest route possible. And, you just have to do this many years of medical school and this much training afterwards. And then, you'll fast track yourself to being someone by the age of 30 or something. But it's not often like that. I think that, things take time to happen well, especially like, big projects or big ideas that you might have that research projects or, career-based goals, they usually take longer than you think. And I think you just got to keep grinding in that general direction. And usually it takes a couple of course corrections and pivots for you to be able to kind of bounce off and eventually kind of end somewhere. But yeah, I think that when I was younger in medical school, you can kind of see things happening like milestone by milestone in front of you. And I don't think it just doesn't usually happen like that. I think it just more happens that you have opportunities that pop up and mentors that guide you in one direction or another, or interests that pop up that you want to follow. And it's never really a straight line. So I don't know if that's like a hard lesson to have learned, but I think that that's like something I wish I understood.
Did just experience help you understand it, or?
I remember older mentors kind of telling me that happens and just not listening, because I was like, no, I'm going to go as hard as I can in this straight line towards my goal and everything's going to be fine. But you just need to sometimes listen to people with experience a little bit more. And now in hindsight, I think I learned that through hindsight and through experience, and having, I'm a primary care doctor now, and that is the last thing I wanted to do in medical school. I was so interested in just doing emergency medicine or some kind of critical care job and being in the fast-paced environment. And, I was really interested in that. And it took me to really do like a couple of years of work in that job to really understand and have a think about what it's like to be in that environment and what am I actually doing. And at the end of the day, like for me, I loved the fast-paced environment, the camaraderie with like colleagues and the procedures and stuff, but fixing a broken arm or like, reversing someone's like heart attack or stroke or whatever, it didn't have enough. It didn't have the impact for me. I've always felt like something could have been done to prevent this happening in the first place. And so every car crash that came through the doors, I was always like, this person just needed to not drink alcohol or something, So I think it just made me feel like preventative medicine was more interesting to me. And it's something I didn't conceptualize until I was in the job. And that was the experience of actually working that job and thinking and having the lived experience to enable me to realize that like primary care is actually a super impactful kind of job to have as a clinician. And I just didn't want to do it because in medical school I thought it was like boring and you see coughs and colds all day, but in reality that's not really what it is. And now I get a real kick out of like, stopping someone smoking or something. It definitely makes me feel different to what I thought it would.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. What makes you well suited to the work that you do?
What makes me well suited to the work I do? That's a really good question. I think that I had this opportunity when I'd come to the end of my public health PhD, where it was a bit of a fresh start as to what I was going to do next, and I had the option to kind of continue in academia, but I'd never really considered myself a kind of career academic. I kind of wanted to find or make a project that just was the exact Venn diagram of maybe my skills that no one else could do. I think that there's a huge thing to say about looking at your whole skill set rather than just your credentials, and kind of, the things that make you like a little bit more of a superhuman than other people in certain tiny areas, and then finding what that Venn diagram spot is, and then you can do whatever that thing is better than like 99% of other people. So for me, it was kind of, designing something that had a combination of my interests, my skill set, and my expertise, and something that I could do and get mastery over and feel a real sense of purpose. So for me, it was the history I've had with kind of tabletop game design, as well as decision making and understanding the literature there quite well. And I guess, being a clinician, I understand kind of healthcare concepts and working with lots of different stakeholders as well. So for me, it was just kind of thinking really hard and designing what it would be that would combine those skills. So for me, I went through that design process of just kind of figuring out what a project would be, and that's why I think that I'm the person for it, is because I have those kind of 3 or 4 things that align to just be correctly in the Venn diagram. And there's no kind of job that exists in terms of being a tabletop scenario designer. It's often done by consultants or it's done internally by teams, but they don't often have the game design background or the decision making kind of literature understanding. So it's something that I can see being potentially impactful, and it might not be, but I'm going to try and measure it to see if it is. And if it is, then I'm going to kind of really work on it really hard and try to make it better.
Mm-hmm. And if you could have redone your path up until now, what would you have done differently?
Oh, I like my path, so I wouldn't do too much differently. I think, even staying in a job that you don't like is a very useful experience, as long as you don't do it for too long. What would I do differently? I think the through line in my career story is I was constantly looking for a way to have impact and make a difference. So when I was 18, that's what I thought the best way to do that would be to go to medical school and become a doctor and kind of help people. And then, when I was in the emergency department, seeing patients one after one, kind of felt like shoveling sand at the beach a little bit. So I felt like I needed to prevent those things from happening. So I went to primary care, and then I recognized that after, successfully training and specializing in primary care, that it was the same thing, just one after one. So that's what led me to research in public health and public health research. You can have big impacts, but you can also spend a lot of time writing grants and doing huge amounts of research and writing papers that 3 people read. So the impact there is kind of, sometimes you wish it was bigger and better. So I think I've just constantly, and then, just going through EA work as well, you can do a lot of thinking in EA and you can do a lot of work there, but whether it actually leads to generating impact is another question. So I think the through line of my career is that I've been constantly zooming out piece after piece, going from treating people one-to-one to trying to treat, populations through public health, and then now trying to treat future populations through organizational decision making. So I'm constantly zooming out. And that's just me searching for a way to have good impact, I guess. What would I change? I think if I was to, I really like medicine. I really like my job, and I think that being a doctor is a hugely impactful job. We should talk about that, I think. It's more impactful than I think a lot of the EA community thinks it is, maybe. I don't know. I think I would have maybe, I don't know, do like some extra training in economics or behavioral economics. I really like those concepts, and I tried to train in those through research projects, but sometimes I wish I'd done some, like, I just think it'd be fun to sit in a lecture theatre again. I'm just a nerd, so I think I'd go back and like just sit in a lecture theatre for economics or something.
It's not too late at all.
Maybe.
Just before, I think it is definitely a good idea to discuss the impact in the more classical medical role. But a question I wanted to ask is, you said that when you are maybe doing research, the research itself might be high impact, but it might not lead to the type of impact that you're looking for. Kind of, how do you think about impact, and how do you think researchers could have more impact?
Yeah, well, there's almost like a whole field of research emerging for like knowledge translation, which is kind of what it's been called, for turning research into kind of popular knowledge, I guess. So I think the way to like conceptualize research is like a bunch of people trying to discover a piece of truth that nobody knows yet, or like answer a question that nobody knows the answer to, and like constantly moving very iteratively that kind of boundary of knowledge outwards. And so research is the very frontline soldiers in that search for truth. So they're the ones who go out there and they ask the question that's like just on the border of knowledge that hasn't been discovered. It might be like, hey, we know this, this particular cell in the body causes this cancer, but we don't know why. So the next question is why? And so that's what research is that very small caterpillar eating the leaf, like way out in front of everyone else. But even once the research is done and a new piece of knowledge is gained, and you have a little bit of confidence that that's the truth, that is like this looks like it's what causes this, or this is what looks like it what treats this, then the next thing is you get that data, you have to turn that data into a research paper so it's read by people who understand exactly what you did in your methods to kind of get that result to be as robust as possible. And that's the scientific method. But that method is very hard to interpret if you aren't a scientist or skilled in reading research papers. So when we say real impact, the real impact is when that new piece of knowledge turns into something in the real world. So it goes, and it can take 10 years. It can take till whenever, like when we've discovered something or learn a new piece of knowledge, for it to be turned into a core understanding for industry or for policymakers or for people, and then turned into a new medication or a new way of doing something or a new technology. It takes a long time for it to go from that gain of knowledge through to translation into understanding and what that implication is, and then into, the real world thing, whether that is a new medication or a new technology or a new behavior or a new way of making policy. And so that's what's called research translation, is like how you get something from the research domain of knowledge into the digestible frame of knowledge, so it can be presented to a policymaker or be presented to industry. And as a researcher, that's like the golden goose egg. Like all you want is for the thing that you kind of worked really hard on to understand to be understood by someone who can actually make a difference with it. And it's really hard. Like a lot of researchers out there struggle with this, and there are really good practitioner researchers that will, have a big active presence on Twitter or in the media and write books, like popular books, or infographics, or do very good interviews or very good speakers. But there's this huge gap out there for translating the knowledge into easier to understand or easier to digest or just even easier to grab attention pieces of information. So that's what I mean by kind of achieving impact as a researcher. Like, I think the average like research paper gets read by like 3 people or something. Like, it's so astronomically low. And it has to do a little bit with kind of the incentives of how like research is structured. Like, a lot of academic institutes will incentivize their, tenure academics by having them on an incentive structure where they have to publish a certain amount of papers in a certain ranking journal per year. And that's like how it's structured for them to keep their job. And it's not a great incentive, because what you get is a lot of really good papers in really high ranking journals, but none of those kind of structures about how you get a tenure position or a professorship or a associate professorship or like a step up in your research job, you step up in the career ladder as a researcher. None of it has to do with impact. Like, it does have to do with like publishing respected research, but there's no incentive for them to have a big Twitter presence or create good videos or infographics or popular information. Like, I think a much better incentive would be to have a blended kind of understanding of knowledge and how we translate that knowledge, because it's really only the researchers that really want their stuff out there. Like, people really want it out there, but you have to do the extra effort as a researcher to get the knowledge to the stakeholder or the technologist or the industry stakeholder or whatever. Like, there's this big missing piece in a lot of the way we think about the frontier of knowledge and how we like move it down the chain towards actual impact. That's really hard. It's really hard to do.
Super fascinating. I kind of want to ask, in the kind of frame of medical knowledge, we need this very much. But who fills that space of translation? It's
an awesome question, and I think that it's a huge missing piece of our whole knowledge infrastructure is the research translator. Like, I think there are people out there who would make awesome research translators who understand the scientific method and can understand a research paper, but also have those skills that are maybe those soft skills. Like, this is that Venn diagram we were talking about before. Like, if you're someone who can understand a research paper and you're good at graphic design or you're good at making videos, there are like, some content producers out there who try to do this, but I think like doing it on a like industrial level or whatever, like, that's what's required. And it's really like needed to find that research that is not talked about. What we do is we see research that is talked about a lot and do like a lot of explaining videos on stuff that's already been explained. It's the real frontline stuff that is in the domain of knowledge, but hasn't yet gotten to the point of common understanding. That's where it's really important to have research translation.
Mm-hmm. Could talk about this forever, I think. Or we could go back to the discussion about why a doctor might be higher impact than people in the effective altruism community have calculated them to be.
Yeah. I'll premise this to say that like the way my research brain works is from a lens of like realism and pragmatism. So like I'm a public health person, so I believe that complex things are complex. So look, there's this kind of meme in EA that if you want to be like the most impactful doctor, like if you're a medical student or if you're a doctor, the most impactful thing for you to do with your career would be to quit and do something on the lines of the most pressing cause. For example, you quit and you should work on, biorisk, or you should quit and work on AI risk or something. And that argument might work for the motivated person on an individual level, but you can't apply that logic to the whole population. Like if you go out there and you have that conversation with every single doctor on planet Earth and you say you need to quit and go work on AI research, you get a pretty significant shift in like people getting sick, I think. And like I think we have to acknowledge that like doctors need to exist, and that's just a fact. Like doctors are a very impactful role on society. They have a net good, and if you are a medical student or a clinician and you are worried about the impact that you're having not being enough, the answer is that out of all the humans on planet Earth, your role is like probably like top 5% in terms of impact, like really high impact, net positive, almost definitely. And if you like it, you should keep doing it, because the one thing that, you know, doctors face is that they face like not enjoying the role or getting burnt out. And then they start making bad decisions and doing bad doctor stuff, or like, you know, being a little, that opens the opportunity to net negative, is if you're careless or if you're fatigued or not taking care of yourself or others. So, but if you enjoy it, you will have a net positive impact over your career. It's a great job. It's very rewarding. And I think a lot of people need to realize that in the AA space, because other options exist. Like you can train and you can become a, you know, like me as an example, like I still work clinically as a doctor a couple of days a week, but because being a doctor allows you to have quite a flexible career, and it's quite, you know, high paying. So I can work 2 days a week. That covers my living expenses, and it frees me up to do 3 days or 4 days, you know, whatever days I want to, for projects that I really want to work on, for things that I really care about. And it's not that I care about them less than my clinical work. I still really enjoy my clinical work, but it allows me a good amount of time per week to work on things that I think are super impactful, that are my particular interests, and not worry too much about getting paid for it. Like I can do kind of the pro bono research work that I'm interested in because my clinical work allows me to. So I have like this, you can almost think about it like investing. Like being a doctor is like a pretty solid return on investment for impact. So you will have a net positive impact almost definitely. And then you can spend a little bit of extra time talking or you know, spending your time on things that are much potentially higher impact, or, you know, much more riskier for impact some other parts of the week. And does that answer your question? I think I'm going a little bit off trail here. So look, maybe to sum it up, I think like being a doctor is a very net positive impact, and it also teaches you really good skills. Like you get an insight into how people are more than almost any other job. Maybe like teachers, maybe like policemen, but it's one of the very few jobs that you get to see like the full spectrum of the population. Like you don't just get trapped in your bubble, really. You get to see people with very low socioeconomic status, very high, you know, very introverted, very not, very sick people, very not. So you get this really good lens on what the actual general population looks like, and how to talk to them and how to interact with them. And I think they're super useful skills for almost any job. So, you know, it opens the door to these learnings and skills that you almost can't get in any other role unless you're in like a public kind of service facing role. So there are things to learn being a doctor that are incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is a major culprit in people losing sight of this flexibility and options and fulfillment that they can have in their job?
Yeah, maybe people go into medicine expecting something different. Maybe there's a lot of expectation from others or from yourself in terms of what you're going to get out of it. And, you know, it's an incredibly good paying job, but for a long time it's not whilst you're training, and it's very hard work. And a lot of it is, you know, by the nature of it being such a big system, the healthcare system now in a lot of countries, it's very bureaucratic. There's a lot of paperwork involved to just navigate the system for people. So look, I think the reality of the job is a little bit different to maybe what people expect going into it. And so they think they're going to be just, you know, someone sitting on a chair, you know, making amazing diagnoses as people walk through the door one by one like a king. But I think it's not really like that. It's very much it's very much more grounded than that, and it's hard work, in some areas quite underpaid for the amount of, you know, unpaid hours you do, and working conditions in a lot of places are pretty terrible. And I think the medical culture needs to like improve their ability to, you know, take care of doctors as well as their patients. But I think those things are improving slowly, and you know, it takes people who want to make impact to improve those things. So I think there are negative things about the job as well. Like there have been times where I have not enjoyed it, and gotten burnt out and had to take some time off just to gather my thoughts and my mental health back together. But I think, overall it can be a rewarding job, but it takes a lot of training and a lot of hard yards to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, dare I say I'm a bit hopeful about the future of even the NHS. Flexible part-time working is becoming more of a thing.
Yeah.
So you can carve the space out for yourself if you can financially afford it.
Yeah.
I don't know, obviously, you know what people's different situations are, but it seems like that's becoming more of a norm. And then I think if you're actually doing something you love, just the energy and motivation you get from that project kind of allows you to put up even with work that you find okay, but maybe not fulfilling.
Well, that's pretty much why I structure my week the way I do. So I, you know, going and working clinical work for a full day requires a huge amount of emotional resilience and like energy. And I think I really would burn out if I was doing that like all day, every day, 5 days a week. I notice even if after I've done a couple of months of work that my energy and motivation for the job goes down, and I'm seeing patients, and I'll be thinking like, I don't want to be here, or I'll be thinking about what am I making for dinner. You know, like I know that my level of care like goes down. And if you're working all day, every day, that would happen for certain. So like for me, it's really good to have that, you know, break and then go work on another project and really have something else to sharpen my mind over. And then it gives me the energy to go back that next clinical day and give it more energy and effort. So, I think having other projects and breaking things up, it has the outside look of making you busier, but from the inside perspective, has the ability to recharge the battery before you discharge it.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other wise words of advice you'd like to share with people?
I think that if you're a medical student listening, or if you're a junior doctor listening, or even someone who's thinking about doing medicine, and you found this podcast because you're interested in medicine, but you want to have impact. Yeah, I think that if you're interested in something, you should keep doing it. So whatever that is, if it's medicine, or if it's, you know, art, or if it's reading, or you know what, just be attracted to your interests and try to focus on what actually keeps your attention and what keeps you, you know, wanting to dive deeper and to learn more and to click through that next page in Wikipedia. Like if you like can start paying attention to things you're interested in, you'll be good at whatever that is. Like you'll be good at the thing you're interested in. Don't kind of go down the line of doing something because you think it's the most prestigious or the best stepping stone or whatever. Like I think it's or someone has the expectation of you to do something. Like just have start to develop a really good sense of the things that grab your attention and your interest, and that goes for like the rest of your life as well. Like I think it's finding those little things that you're interested in is finding pieces which other people would probably be bored in, and then, you know, you're the one who will go that little extra further because you're interested in it. That's how you find yourself on the way to impact, I think.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you very much for the conversation today.
No problem. It was really fun.